Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham and such. Perspective is the word for the day or the week or the word occupying my trains or whatever they are, planes of thought. And just thinking about how people become who they are, and it's all this perspective stuff in terms of you view things and you view them in a context, and there's all kinds of things that are around the things, and there's frames around the things, and there's emphasis, and stuff is out of proportion, bigger and smaller, and everybody has different things and different sizes to their perspective. And that's really all there is this perspective. And the idea, I would argue, is that there's a certain rightness to having a mechanically correct perspective, being able to put it into the little line art and get it accurate where everything is the right size, the real size. And the argument would be made is that people have very abstract notions of correct perspective, and that they don't obey logical rules. They get into all kinds of fallacious thinking, make arguments from all kinds of places that make no sense, that are not sensible. And it distorts in fundamental ways their perspective because they're not obeying the rules, the logical rules of the way reality really travels, and, what kind of lines it obeys, logical lines. I just scroll through some of these Google images of perspective as seen, from Google's perspective, from the algorithm's perspective. This is what perspective means. And it's not terrible. I mean, there are way too many, too much emphasis on drawings, but that's the way it turned out, and not enough on this idea. This is kind of a good one. Looked from one side, the number 6 is 6. Looked the other way, it's the 9. And that's how fundamentally different people see things. Alright, so this is coincidentally or whatever. And Akantavad made 3 more videos, little short things from his trip to Pikistan. I mean Stinkatonia. Crapolia. Somewhere in India, where they do the ritual burning of the people, and the pushing of the out into the, I guess it's the Ganges. They sail them out there to get, to sink into the sediment of their bathing water. Yes, drink your dead. It's the best way to eat them. But anyway. And he talks about how they have this wonderful perspective, and they're so in touch with dying process and all this crap, and his perspective is so biased. He just has a huge bias for humans in squalor, and living on the earth or something, eating the bugs, and it's just such a crock of crap if you draw it in straight lines. If you look at it in a straight line logical perspective, they obviously aren't dealing with death very well. They're not just shoveling people into a furnace in a nice efficient way, the dead. No, they're doing this whole ritual and piling flowers on them, and carrying them on their little, through the streets and their little stretchers first, and parades of the dead, and beating of the drums, and all this ceremony and blah blah blah. So it's all full of ritual, and yet he calls that having some sort of grounded perspective about dying. And clearly it's all just another circumstance where if you have the money, You die fancy, you don't have money, you die, you're just getting shoveled into the pit. Lots of ways to look at it. People's pets die all the time, and they don't. It's probably illegal to bury them nowadays in your own yard or something, but most people choose not to. And this pet that they loved, in death is going to be treated rather brutally. Some burly guy with a pair of dirty gloves is basically just going to be pulling them out of a dumpster and throwing them in the fire. It's not going to be any graceful ceremony. The parted won't be the detachment won't be in any kind of with any kind of dignity. And the fact that we expect some of that for the stuff we care about um, is a perspective built out of emotion, because we care, and we can't detach the person from their material body. We can't see it as not being sort of themish, in some sort of way, even after death. And it's an insult to them in a way to treat that body shabbily or without care. And we all have that problem, and there's the mystics in India don't have any solution for that problem, clearly, because they're also dealing with it in some sort of way where they think this is how you get to a better place, is to have this ritual and process in death. Um, and it's a need, a human psychological problem. But it is just a psychological problem. The straight lines of real perspective say they're dead. The body's really quite irrelevant, and you're just sort of wasting energy concerning yourself with that, and you should concern yourself with the other living things rather than waste any effort, adorning the dead, you know, providing for their ritualistically fancy voyage into the smoke. So anyway, but this is all that's all there is here, is this idea of perspective, and how we acquire it. And I guess fundamental to me, you sort of, to have an accurate perspective or view of the world, to really understand how you work, you sort of have to understand that there is these two parts of you. There's this emotional animal, the feeling thing, who has needs, who needs to win, and conquer and have things, and possess things and control things. And then there's the rational brain that could understand there's a bigger world. My needs aren't the only needs. All the other needs are just as important, so I can't make me really big and make everybody else really small. That's not a rational perspective. The other brains are just as important, that they're comfortable and that they're not sick, or they're not disabled, or they're not crippled, and all of those things are just as important for them as it is for me. And that's a rational perspective, one obeying the logical rules. You can't, but emotionally, that's not fun. That's not a fun perspective, because it makes the world big, it makes us small, and it makes problems a lot bigger. And because we get to discount all the problems that don't affect us. We get to think that AIDS doesn't exist because we don't have it, and we can think that ALS doesn't exist because we don't have it. Lots of things we can just discount from our view of the world because it doesn't affect me. So it's a real problem that we have these two sides to our capacity to exist. The feeling side that is so dominantly controlled by emotions and these visceral reactions of the physiology, me hungry, me horny, me needy. And then we have this intelligence capacity that allows us to see the internal dialogue, the conversation of our emotions, and to be able to critique them and say, well, that's a sensible emotion and that one's sort of rubbish. And by labeling them, we have some control in terms of our intelligence, um, can humiliate our emotional self and into acquiescing to the fact that we must be intelligent beings first and emotional beings second. We must be obedient to practicalities. You must be pragmatic, and statistics are important, and facts are important, and it can't just be about, well, um, you know, every black person I ever met was a shithead. You can't just do that kind of rubbish. Um, you know, even if it may, even if your life experience may be one um, that maybe um, happens to coincidentally fit with the real perspective, you can't see the source of it as having any credibility, because we know that our emotions are um, not very credible, that we don't choose who to love very carefully or wisely. It's just kind of visceral, and it's based on these little, kind of frivolous and trivial aspects of their appearance or personality. That it doesn't have anything to do with anything truly deep that we're appreciating. It's all kind of superficial and cosmetic. So we can kind of know that this emotional brain is just a bullshitter, and that the real value is in this idea that we can pencil in with our intelligence signposts and notices, and we can recognize when we're being selfish and gluttonous and um, you know self-aggrandizing and egomaniacal and all that kind of crap. We can watch us do it, we can notice us doing it, recognize us doing it, and we can do something about it. Then we have some kind of ability to remold the perspective. Now the trick is, it's intelligence can't really work unless your brain has a respect for it, because its real weapon is things like guilt and humiliation. It has to make things that you don't see as valuable by putting them in a new skin, so to speak, associating them with something like having integrity or honor. So you kind of understand that, well, I won't be a thief because I don't want to dishonor, I don't want to humiliate my parents or something, or I don't want to be known as a shithead. I want something better than crappy thief written on my tombstone. My kids will be embarrassed. Lots of reasons to stop us from doing things that we know what we want to do, and we know they're wrong, but we just don't seem to have any power over them until our brain comes up with some, well, you're going to go to jail for 20 years, or impose some other, some perspective that allows us to see that even though it looks yummy, that it is dangerous in the terms of it can lead to all kinds of things that won't be good and yummy and fun. And so that's all this is, really. So it's just this idea of doing perspective. And so I keep trying to get people to expand their perspective, in the sense of recognize the fact that regardless of what you think about how magnificent human beings are, that there is so much, not so magnificent events happening to them. And then the animal kingdom, that is just magnified exponentially in terms of the raw, nasty, hard bite that it is. The 10,000 dead baby sea turtles for every adult turtle. The numbers in birds is probably 100 to 1. 100 dead baby birds for the one that survives. Horrible attrition. and very young, cute things killed. 10 lion cubs for every adult lion. Uh, and if you had to do it, you had to do the killing to do the creating. I think you'd know that this isn't a good deal. It's not rational. It's not sensible to impose all of that harm for the, you know, fundamentally, you know, un, almost invisible value, when you recognize that most of the values just have to do with your sense of winning. I'm not going to be defeated by the facts of life. Well, the point is they have defeated you if you aren't recognizing them to win. If your way of beating the truth is to ignore it, with your fantasies about your God coming to the rescue, or your singularity, or your spirituality pill, whatever it is that you've, panaceaed, um, the reality away, and that's all. It's just a placebo. It's just some little delusion you run as a fake little narrative and a fake little story, so you can make the waste that is in the nature of the life game, just whitewash it away, just make it not part of the perspective, not part of evaluation, not part of anything you have to justify, when it does have to be justified. If you're going to be honest, if you're going to be somebody who cares about the picture being reality, about living in the real world, not a distorted world, one distorted for your own personal gluttony, your own personal ability to take advantage and to pretend you're winning. When you're not winning, you're losing, and you're not productive, you're destructive, and you don't want to hear that. You don't want to know that's the truth of your presence here, and your influence, and your contribution. So it's really is a big word, perspective, in the sense that you can use the idea that this is about a model that's in your brain, and like all model builders, the idea is to take the real thing and create the synthetic model that truly represents the real thing, that doesn't cheat, that accurately runs the truth in your head, not running a distortion where you've taken out all the realness, the realness in terms of the real value elements that really kind of define success, failure, good, bad, pretty, or ugly. And so yes, most people, I'd say, have hugely distorted the perspective by painting it pink, and giving it, make these lines rounder so they don't look so harsh, and it isn't friendly enough, not enough round corners, it's not child safe, too many details, the truth has too many lines, you're just too you can't be bothered. It's too inconvenient. You just want to put your coin in the slot and get on your roller coaster, get on your fun ride, and you don't really want to hear about what the fuel is, and how many people will be destroyed by the fact that you're going to ride this reckless roller coaster. So the idea of framing, it comes into it, just again, it's just about what we emphasize. So there's people who will say there's people who are framing optimism, and other people are framing pessimism, and they'll just use these labels and say that's the end of the conversation and blah blah. But that's what it really comes down to: is how do you argue for this true perspective? The one that's got the straight logical lines. And the bottom line is that's what you're stuck with is logic. You're stuck with making reasoned arguments, and the reasoned arguments can't be love conquers all or something, or or some sort of silver lining bullshit, or well, things will always work out for the best, or just some cliche trite trivialism, to sit there and make it all go away, to pretend that there isn't real math right in front of you that's saying something like 2 plus minus 4,678,000, and somehow you're making that equal plus, I don't know, 482,000 or something. Like you're way ahead, when no, you're way behind. You have this huge deficit that you're running, and you're just pretending it. Well, the stock market's up. Well, of course it's up, because you've got a whole bunch of debt money in it. You've created a bunch of currency in the form of loans that can never be paid back, and all of that currency has been invested, and it doesn't. There's no way it can work. It can't last forever. You can't do that forever. So it's a train wreck going to happen. And even those arguments are, I think, kind of, they're so simple, in the sense you could just argue that, we know there's going to be a last generation on Earth. That's the way it's going to happen. There's going to be something climatic. It's going to happen, something very dramatic, physically, will happen to the Earth, whether it's an asteroid or a solar flare or some other kind of thing, and it's going to be just really bad, difficult for most people to survive, and they might be killed in a very, brutal way, starvation and famine and violence and all kinds of nastiness, and you're essentially, by endorsing this game, you're kind of endorsing the creation of that last generation, and you're just kind of saying it's okay to commit a few murders along the way. I can annihilate people, and I can destroy them and kill them in all kinds of horrible ways to justify Donald Trump Jr. I made another one, another idiot, and you're proud and saying, oh yeah, it's worth it. I've killed a few people to make an idiot, and that's what the average human is. And that's the other part that's so funny, because most people's perspective, I think included in most people's drawing of reality, is the idea that most of the other people on Earth are fucktards. I think that's in their drawing, and yet they'll defend it. They'll say it's okay, make more fucktards than whatever cool people, and that's okay, no problem. It's like saying if most of your kids were going to be born retarded, you'd still have kids. And I think most people would say, no, I wouldn't do that. That would be retarded. That would be retarded. So yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. But they're doing it. You're actually doing exactly that. In embracing this thing called humanity, when the fact is you don't like most of humanity. You think most humans are assholes. So these are the obvious, totally crooked, bizarre lines that are in people's drawings, and you're saying, how can you have these straight lines? You can do some logic, don't have kids if most of them are going to be retarded. Yeah, you can do that logic. Go get the test, and do the right thing. They can get that, but they can't get the big picture where they committed to something that's 100 times worse. They've endorsed something 100 times worse, killing 10 baby lion cubs to have one lion. That's okay. you um, those crooked lines, they're just so glaring. And so that's sort of the purpose of this conversation. Is I'm saying I really should be able to create some sort of sketch of reality and point out those completely non-congruent elements in your drawing of reality, where like one side is you got all the lines going right, and the other side every single line's going crooked. Not one is obeying the perspective rules, the logic rules. So, but then that gets back to the argument that how much of it is about some sort of visceral emotional thing about beauty and love and la 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 la, and all stuff that I have a tremendous amount of passion for. I'm often brought to substantial emotional, I won't say tears, but at beautiful things. It's quite an experience sometimes, the way it just, whoa, that's beautiful. Um, so it's not like I don't understand this emotional response, but you understand it as an emotional response. That yes, I understand. I have a subjective. It's like kittens. I can't find a kitten repulsive. It's just not possible. I can't help but think that it's really important to fix that. If it's hurting a kitten, then it's a problem that needs fixing. Where maybe if it was some other animal, I wouldn't say it needs fixing so urgently. And I can see that huge bias. I still have the bias, in the sense I still have the visceral emotion, but I have the knowledge that says every time those little things are triggered and I start doing this beauty thing or cute thing, there's just a little noise inside the brain that says, remember that whole cute problem. You don't want to let that decide how you treat something. You want to treat it, based on the content of its character, not the fuzziness of its fur. Little simple truisms that can, relieve you from this emotional bias. I mean, little sunset pictures are, quite, they do something to you. But it's a lie, because it's all just emotion. It has nothing to do with whether any of that is more something-ish, than an image of the belly of a spider. It's just a subjective, an emotional thing, an irrational, conditioned thing, just based on what kind of environment you grew up in and what kind of stuff turns you on. It's like that whole thing with art. You had all that. I mean, I grew up in the, graffiti art generation, and I found most of it repugnant. But clearly the people who are making this stuff think this is all zowie pow wow, and it's like break dancing. I don't like regular dancing much, but I mean, I just don't see the point of this swirl around flippy flip bullshit. What the fuck is that? It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, it's just because subjectively I don't see that as proper living room furniture, So it's kind of like we have expectations about things. I have a certain, you walk into a living room and you expect there shouldn't be a kitchen table and a bathroom sink and lots of little things there shouldn't be as furniture in a living room. Living room should be certain things, kitchen should be certain things, bathroom should be certain things, and those are all kind of conditioned responses. And so it just ends up being this subjective prejudice where, yes, I like certain colors. I like blue. I don't like yellow very much. It's all just nonsense. It's just a prejudice. It's just a distortion in perspective created by the fact that we don't have We don't grow up everywhere and experience everything. We grow up somewhere and experience a limited amount of things, and we have to learn how to eat the stuff we grew up in. And so we learn to like it. Even if it sucks, we learn to like it. So many poor people embrace their poverty because they grew up with a bunch of poor people. Um, rich people do the same thing, and they don't apply any kind of logic that there's, um, some more efficient way to live. They just all think squander is the way to be. Yes, you just throw shit around and waste shit and, be very self-indulgent. And that's the way you live. That's the way the living room should be, so to speak. And it's just because they have a myopic, a terribly incomplete perspective. So they haven't really thought about what it is to be a living thing on Earth, and they haven't thought about what's the average conscious experience right now. If you mixed all of the conscious experiences on Earth right now together, what color would it be? And my argument is it's going to be a brown. It's going to be some kind of not, it's going to be a shitty color. It's not going to be great. It can't be. You're always going to just have at best some sort of thing called mediocrity, at best. And I'd say more realistically, you're going to have something far less than just mediocre. Far dirtier, far smellier, far more diseased. It's maybe that's a way to think about it, is to combine what's the average disability on Earth, and if you had to carry that average disability through your life, an average amount of bad vision and bad hearing and bad function and all kinds of dysfunctions, and you had to wear that skin, maybe you'd realize that maybe this isn't a good enough skin, that the average skin just isn't a good enough machine to be walking in. That it's not, if it was a robot, you wouldn't buy it. It just doesn't perform well enough. I suppose that's a way of doing this, is to just, the average car, or the average dishwasher, or the average, and just recognize that the average isn't going to be the one that lasts 10 years, and oh, it always performs so well, it's does everything just right. No, it's going to be something less than that. And I'd say in the case of life, it's the average is the fact that you have to measure those 10 cubs, maybe 1 year old or 2 years old, not quite mature, and they go through some horrible process of getting killed by hyenas and brutalized in awful ways. So you have to take those 10 deaths and pile them into the one life that didn't die yet. But technically it died 10 times already. It already died 10 times. Went through a horrible death process 10 times. And there's still one more to go. And that's not a bargain. You wouldn't sentence a dog to it, so to speak. There's just nothing, it's just not a good enough. And that should be a perspective that everybody can see, that there is a thing called good enough, and this isn't good enough. It doesn't meet the statistical requirements. It falls way too short. And even though it has beautiful things, see, this is supposed to be beautiful here, I guess, this little ballerina thing, but that's a fairly ugly dress, and the pose looks fake, and the head is too small, and so to me it's not very aesthetic, not thin and linear enough. So fail in terms of something that goes, oh, look at that, that's hot. No, it's not. But to somebody else, they see this as like, because they had big poofy flowers in their house or something, they, oh, that's like a big poofy flower, and, so they see something more, and they like the color green, so it, and yellows and oranges, those are all kind of like colors to me. But that's all just emotional crap. That's all just subjective shit based on the fact that I speak English, I think English is kick-ass because I speak it and it seems to work really well, and all the other languages seem really silly and nonsensical because I don't understand any of them. They all don't make any sense at all. I mean, that's an obvious bias. Now, you could make a logical argument that some languages are idiotic structure, just by the structure alone, because they're just not very functional. They're not constructed to be able to make lots of words and to be able to convey lots of ideas, because everything has to be a picture, and they're very clunky. So you can make empirical or really logically sensible and reasonable arguments saying something sucks. Um, you know, and even though you have a bias, it doesn't change the fact that the thing sucks. Um, yeah. So, uh, so not everything you feel has to be negated as a truth. It's just that you always have to test it and say, when is it legitimate and when is it illegitimate? Um, yeah. So these images are starting to get quite distant from, being very perspective-y. you know, but opinion, that's what this says over here. You can't see that. It doesn't, whatever. It doesn't fit in the page properly. This almost looks like the lifeboat picture. So this is like a Ganges picture again. So people living the good life. All crammed in some stinking rowboat. Do you want to sentence your own kids to do that? Would you have a kid and throw him on that boat every day? To go work at the rug factory. Every day to go through this grind, while he collects more parasites that eat him from the inside out, and he'll look like he's 90 when he's 40, and you'd feel okay about that. That's what you're endorsing by endorsing the game. It's as if you're sentencing yourself to be eaten by the sharks, because that's going to happen. A certain number of people are going to be eaten by sharks. And you're basically forcing the issue. You're basically saying it must happen. We must yes, it's totally acceptable. I don't care how bad people get killed. I don't care how hard and brutal it is. I don't care how many kids we give cancer to. Life must go on. We must keep fighting, because we can't admit that we're just not good enough. That there isn't anything beautiful enough about the human being to justify the huge price being paid for this infestation of teeth and assholes. It's just teeth and assholes. And they have teeth for a reason, because they're going to shove everybody else out their asshole. And the teeth are for getting you into the stomach and through the asshole. It's just not good. I don't know what Easter Island. The past in perspective. So I guess somebody thinks they can do that. Yeah. Just think about the past. Just think about all the brutalities in the recorded history of human beings. And imagine how brutal it was in the unrecorded. All the native tribes that, killed each other every year, just, it's happening right now with the other apes. They don't just, their population isn't controlled by some magical force that says, oh, you can only have so many apes on the mountain. The population's controlled because they kill each other. It's brutal. Oh, this is amazing. Yeah, the Obama thing. See, I think you can empirically say, I think you can say with quite a lot of authority that these paintings are pieces of suck. And there's no way, I mean, I haven't seen all the paintings in the presidential hall, but this piece of shit shouldn't be hanging there. I mean, there's a certain obligation to conform, when you It's like having the American flag in the White House. Like it wouldn't be. I would like to take most of them out, but you have to have a couple of flags in there. There's certain rules you have to obey. And this portrait is such a piece of shit. You're just saying, man, what is their perspective? How are they seeing all these portraits, trying to at least elevate the presidency to some sort of dignity? Like these men had some character and were fighting for something, and they had some substantialness. So you paint them in a manly way, you know, not riding on a donkey. I mean, it's just so bad. But how could you be so silly? How could you think this is this whatever this is, this Photoshop crap art, has any place in as a presidential portrait? I mean, it's just like we should put it on the money. Washington, Lincoln's portrait, all those great portraits, and we should put that piece of crap on the money. Ugh, amazing. I mean, it really should be the standard. You should be able to say, hey, if you can't put the painting on the money, the painting can't hang on the wall. That should be the rule. So this is you can't see this one, but there's little men standing around with giant chess pieces, and that's sort of a way to think of, it's not that we're failing. I'm not asking you to say we failed, because the prospect of winning here was impossible. We're basically Tyrannosauruses, in function. Here we are trying to play a civilized game, and we've really not been made to be civilized. We have a DNA molecule that doesn't give a shit about civilization. It doesn't care about attrition, obviously. It kills, 100,000 octopuses to make one octopus. I mean, it just doesn't care about it. And that's the system that built us. And it built us in this world just full of all this crap. And so, there was no prospect of glory in this battle to achieve control, or for intelligence to win. There's just nothing to win here. Because all we're fighting for are silly needs, silly desires, silly ambitions, totally unrealistic hopes, little fairy tales of reality. We're chasing pixies. And then, I'm showing up to say, you're failing. But the failure was even in trying to catch a pixie. That was a stupid ambition from the very beginning, to think that you're going to create these satisfied organisms when the game isn't about being satisfied. It's about being hungry. That's what motivates things, not comfort. Comfort doesn't make you move. Discomfort makes you move. We're built to be uncomfortable, not comfortable. We're built to fight. We're not built to live. So get over your disappointment that you might have to accept that yes, humans are fail. And that the game is fail. And there's just no point in shoving these pacifiers, into the prodigies' faces and saying, chew on that till your real teeth show up, and then you can start, really causing a lot of pain and suffering. You can start biting real feeling things, and sucking their blood. So, we're at the end, so I guess that's a good place to end, is at the end. I think I've done my job here. Let's see if there's anything something super duper, but there really isn't. But this is sort of these images of grandpa and his grandchildren and this silly little emotional gratification thing, like somehow I'm surviving into the future in the forgotten notions of the future people. It's like nobody talks about Donald Trump's father. Certainly, and his kids will be blighted by the fact, and his grandkids by the fact that they're just the spawn of the Donald, you know. So it just doesn't work that way, that you all get your proper credit and your proper due. As I've stated before, one of the perspective truths that you should understand about perspective of the real model is that deserve has nothing to do with it, that fairness isn't built into the game, and that this selfish cunt that is your nature doesn't really want fairness, I guess. You know, unless you've made it a humiliation meme, unless you're a fighter who really wants a good fight, you know, not just a win, but he wants a good contest, a good test. He wants to beat the best so he can call himself the best. Most people aren't like that. They want their opponent to drop dead of a heart attack, and they get the gold medal. Yeah, they're not humiliatable enough, because they'll wear watermelon costumes. But anyway, yeah, silly creatures, horribly silly. See, look, pretty colors. They're pretty, and that's all. People are they're just tweaking your privates, and seducing you into a perspective that has nothing to do with the stark, brutal reality, which is more like this, right? Big, giant crocodile teeth thing. Yeah, that's the reality. This is the survivor, really. This is DNA's gold medal winner right here, the crocagator. That's what the mechanism really likes. That's the thing that's lasted hundreds of thousands of years. We've been here but a very short while by comparison. So, a little cutesy picture. A little cutesy. Oh, cutesy, cutesy. Tripesy, tripesy. Yeah. Oh, that poetry. This is so bad. Oh, Jesus. There's some things people should be shot for. That's almost on the list. That is just so fucking bad. Anyway. Humans have tragically underperformed. Like I said, not all their fault, because they were in an impossible contest. But there's just no doubt about it. I mean, there's an awful lot of just completely silly failure out there. So anyway, till next time and such, so forth and whatnot.